I'm the co-founder of the BLIS Collective, and it's my pleasure to welcome you again to the Solidarity House. See some folks from last night, and if it's your first time here, welcome. Solidarity House is both a space and a practice where we are creating meaningful alignment, where imagination meets infrastructure and solidarity becomes a strategy. This gathering, our conversation today, is designed to strengthen our collective capacity to imagine and build the future of independent storytelling and co-design pathways toward a more sustainable and equitable creative future that centers repair, liberation, and sovereignty. Live captioning for this session is available through Coda, a web-based tool accessible on your device. It doesn't require an account or login or any unique links. Or the unique links are available via the QR code posted around the room and on the website, thesolidarityhouse.com/schedule. So this panel today is titled Solidarity Stories, the Transformative Work of Building Collective Power. We're grateful to have the following folks join us. I'll let y'all introduce yourselves in a second, but we have Noelani, Auguston with Children of the Setting Sun. Yeah, let's give a round of applause for each person. To my left, right next to me, we got Idris Brewster with Kinfolk Tech. Tracy, Rector, who wears multiple hats, but who is here today with Kikuyu Land.
Yeah.
My co-founder herself, Savannah Romero with the BLIS Collective. And last but certainly not least, my boy Kahlil Greene, the Gen Z historian. Yes. Tap in on Instagram and TikTok. Okay, so we're gonna get started. We're gonna try to have like a very, very family kind of conversation. So a little bit lighthearted as we talk about a very difficult topic, which is building power. So first, let's just go down the line. Introduce yourself, how you show up in the world, and your solidarity hot take.
My name is Idris Brewster. I'm an artist, founder of Kinfolk Tech. I show up as an artist and a human, myself. And hot take. So my hot take is, no matter how many films we make, how many convenings we have, how many immersive experiences we create, we're not going to truly reach liberation until we address the root cause of that issue, which is the infrastructure, the systems, and the collective ownership of those spaces. I'm really tired of being in spaces where I have to conform to the power structures that exist to get my story and my community story known. And so how can we turn resistance into something that moves towards that collective ownership of land, of infrastructure, of our stories, of knowledge, technologies? That is the North Star for me. So thank you.
Is this on? Okay. Hot Tadzikam Bechu, Nunui Sasori, Savannah Romero, Titsup, Erica Nodaiwanli. Good morning, everyone. My name is Savannah Romero. I'm a citizen of the Eastern Shoshone Nation. My family's from the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. I'm the co-founder of the BLIS Collective, also a film producer, screenwriter, writer, sister, auntie, friend, lover, cousin. Yeah. And my solidarity hot take is that a lot of people, solidarity is becoming a increasingly popular word, even a buzzword concept. And so a lot of people want to be about solidarity, but a lot of folks aren't ready yet. And I can expand on that further later.
Yes. Hey everyone, my name's Tracy, Rector, and I, as Trevor said, I wear many hats. I'm most proud of being a mama and a grandmother and an artist. I'm just grateful to be here too. That's how I'm showing up. I'm grateful to be alive, to hold gratitude in my heart in these political times, and to be in this intentional space. As a mixed heritage filmmaker, I also bring a lens of advocacy, marginalized viewpoint, just as a watcher, as a witness. And my solidarity hot take is that it takes work, takes intentionality, and community care. I'm excited for this conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Kahlil Greene. I go by the Gen Z historian on social media, mainly TikTok and Instagram. And to describe what I do on social media, my tagline is that I like to expose historical injustice. But when I'm explaining that simply, I say that I make videos about terrible things that the American government has done. And then I also follow up with a joke saying that I'll never run out of content. There will always... I was telling some people that I met today that I've already made 600 videos over the past 5 years, and I'm just getting started. So mainly on social media, though I have worked with organizations like National Geographic to do longer form videos, and I'm hoping to do this independently in the future because many organizations, when you work with them, they have the desire, they say, to push the boundaries, but when it's time to actually do that, they pull back and they censor. So I'm very much looking forward to being more independent in my work. And my solidarity hot take, which I'll also expand on later, is that in many cases, solidarity should be transactional.
We got the hot takes.
We're coming in hot to this
Hot
morning.
takes.
Noelani kunstna itja nuksa akka shohai itastalo ka kanaka yet komete shoy tia I amithlia. My name is Noelani. My traditional name is Titian. I am Nooksack, Shwai Village, and Kanaka, Hawaiian. I am a producer and screenwriter with Children of the Setting Sun Productions out of Lummi Nation or Bellingham, Washington. We tell Indigenous stories of gratitude, reciprocity, and respect in addressing different social issues and environmental issues Indigenous people face. I show up in the world as a storyteller at heart. I used to be that little res girl writing poems and like imagining a world out the window on a snowy day and writing it down. And then I, just was like, let me learn this craft and help tell our own stories through an authentic lens. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, an auntie, a matriarch in training. But yeah, I just want to show up with gratitude and respect and just want to raise all my hands. This is like the greatest form of respect we can give is raising our hands. And I just want to raise my hands to all the people in this room, the Solidarity House staff, the crew filming it all, the photographers, the guests. Thank you. Haishka.
And your solidarity
sorry,
hot take.
my
Come on,
solidarity hot take. Sorry, 3-part question. I'm dyslexic. ADHD, yeah. So my hot take is diversity is divisive.
Hot take. Okay, so we're gonna. So what I'm gonna do next? We're gonna go Noelani, Kahlil, then Idris. Expand on your hot take, and then weave in your answer and finish this sentence. The biggest villain towards solidarity stories is. So expand on your hot take, and then talk a little bit about the villains and the roadblocks that stand in the way of solidarity and solidarity stories.
Yeah, I don't think, so the statement diversity is divisive. I don't agree with that at all. I think that our diversity makes us richer. I think embracing different lenses and cultures and ways of thinking in the world into story and filmmaking in order to reach audiences it's medicine, it's healing, it's to come together. That's our whole goal at Setting Sun is to bring the people together, whether you're Indigenous, Black, brown, white, any color, right? You can come to our center and feel welcomed and embrace your identity and where you come from and have that acknowledged and respected and your lens at the table. I think that, our diversity makes us stronger. I think that when you have different lenses at the table, it's a richer product. It's things that haven't been seen before or heard before. I think that, I think that's just a little bit of expansion on that. And then the second part was, what's the biggest villain to?
That stands in the way of solidarity and solidarity stories.
Yeah, I think it's like one, money, and then but authoritative censorship and like what can and can't be distributed because of topic, or I don't want to touch that because it's controversial. Well, those are the stories that need to be shared. Those ones that create those conversations, those hard conversations.
So I'll start off by answering the second part, which is the biggest villain to solidarity is the inability to recognize our own biases, even as people of color. And to follow up on expanding on my hot take, I think one of the reasons BLIS exists, specifically centering Black and Indigenous voices, is because you can see in the data, statistically, financially, health outcomes, Black and Indigenous people are the quote unquote worst off in America. And oftentimes with other groups, groups of people of color, other groups of oppressed people, whether it's class, gender, whatever you want to call it, there's an inability to recognize that even in these groups, they can have biases that harm each other. So when I think about transactional conversations amongst activist groups, I'm thinking of having it be a condition that you have to address your own anti-Blackness within a movement before Black activists can work with you. I think about times where there's been political movements for tangible resources. I'm specifically from the DMV, which is the most diverse place in America, actually. My town, Germantown, has actually been ranked the most diverse place in America. And oftentimes, activism, I'll be very specific, let's say with the Asian American community, can include very anti-Black policies around policing or around education that's built into a lot of the demands. And it goes both ways, and all sorts of dynamics within activist movements where people's own harm is not recognized. And I think transactional conversation should be about weeding out the biases, the discrimination, understanding that we can work together so long as what you're advocating for does not seek to oppress me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love films, narratives no more than the next person. I'm an artist. I do immersive experiences using like immersive technology. But I think over the past year, I've been thinking a lot about imagination and how can we give form to that imagination. And to me, it's brought me to a place where imagination infrastructure is something that there's a lack of investment in and funding around, and not having the imagination reach as large of a population as possible really limits society's understanding of what we can do, what liberation can mean and can look like. And so that's come to the form of me trying to create spaces. How can we have spaces that truly center the folks within that space without external factors really deciding what goes on? Institutions that are really prioritizing memory, culture across diverse groups. It's my organization, Kinfolk Tech. We are a digital archive and experiential platform that creates immersive experiences around communities of color in the US and globally across the diaspora. And back in October, we did our first biggest convening, which was called KIN, Festival of Memory and Imagination. And we, for a month, they only gave us a weekend out of each week out of the month, but we convened a lot of our community. We had a few projects that we showed. We worked with James Baldwin's family to create an interactive archive. Worked with Nikki Giovanni to capture her telling her poem, Quilting the Black Eyed Pea. Built a garden that you could engage with this technology. Had our partners build a reading room archive space. You could scan parts of the archive, take it home with you. We had community workshops, wellness, Reiki, massages, food from across the diaspora. And that was really a space where folks felt welcomed, felt like they could be and share, and build, and really talk about what liberation means and put that into practice. And so that was an experiment for us. But after October, we got approached by a bunch of different museums, cultural spaces, giving, and while I was on those tours, I was like, oh my gosh, like, if my people step foot in this space, it's not gonna be the same feeling as a space that we built for ourselves. They're not gonna be as open. And on one of those tours, I asked the museum curator, like, hey, like, what does the success look like for this work for you, for bringing us here? And he's like, yeah, it would be if you could bring your community to us and the amount of members you could bring. And so for me, I was like, all right, that is a non-starter. I've done experiences, first AR experience at the MoMA, I've won awards at Sundance, Tribeca, and all around. And at this point, it's like, how can we create spaces that can really highlight us and that are sort of outside of the confines of those traditional institutions? That's truly what I feel like we need to truly build power and make our dreams reality. But the infrastructure and funding to support folks doing things outside of those spaces is few and far between. So I think a collective approach, like here at Solidarity House, is really a true example of what that imagination infrastructure can be. And so I'm asking folks with the power to really understand that and invest in us and invest in other people to really make this a durable thing and not something that is ephemeral. So.
Yes, yes. So as moderator, I'm gonna also answer the question a little bit, and then I'm gonna come to you, Savannah. So, because I think my answer, as my co-founder, probably weaves into what how you'll answer this next question. So, yeah, my solidarity hot take is that solidarity will hurt. You know, solidarity will make you cry, and it's supposed to hurt, and that you're going to lose something by being in solidarity with somebody. And with another movement. And then I think my villain is capitalism. So, Savannah, question for you. What does solidarity require and ask of us? And how does that show up in your work?
Yeah, there's two kind of things I want to talk about. The first is, I think solidarity as a concept, if we're thinking about defining it, right, I think many of us in this room would have different definitions of what that means, what that looks like in practice. And I think for us to be successful, we have to be intentional about outlining the pathway and identifying the tangible steps and being able to articulate what does the future look like once solidarity has been realized, right? And if we can't articulate that, then we don't have a tangible path forward. We don't have a strategy, right? We're just talking about a really big concept. And so I think number one is having that pathway and having that vision and being able to do that helps us determine, okay, what are the barriers, what are the roadblocks that need to get us to where we're trying to be, right? And then the other thing is, a bit to what Trevor said, is that solidarity requires sacrifice. You know, I really love what Kahlil said about, you know, transaction and being real about that. And I think that's true. And I think it also requires sacrifice, right? I think, you know, what is your desire for solidarity inspiring you to sacrifice? Because it's not easy work. I think sometimes we can think about solidarity and think it's all rainbows and sunshines, and actually the work is really, really hard. There are times where Trevor and I ask ourselves, why do we get into this business, right? Of building bridges of solidarity. In our organization, we focus on 4 main movements: the Black-led reparations movement, the Indigenous-led land back movement, baby bonds, and guaranteed income. We tend to focus a substantial part of our time in building bridges between Black and Indigenous communities, which means that we're trying to heal and create solidarity between 2 groups of people who have been intentionally pitted against each other for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? We are trying to wade through the deep waters of what it means to bring people together when Indigenous people enslaved Black people, right? When the Buffalo Soldiers were sent out to kill Native people, that anti-Blackness absolutely exists in Native communities, right? These are not easy things to move through. It takes time, it takes relationship, it takes trust, and it means addressing conflict and tension head on. And for me, my sacrifice, I do not like conflict. I am conflict averse. I do want, us to get along. That doesn't happen, right? It always, conflict always arises, and we find ourselves in positions where we're having to hold that space of, wading through hundreds of years of violence and oppression, and it's really not easy.
Savannah, say a little bit more about BLIS's membership and our membership model, and then Tracy will come to you, and then Kahlil and Noelani want to hear a little bit more about your work. But yeah, Savannah, expand a little bit on our membership model.
Yeah, so we are a membership collective. We brought together 47 organizations, individual people, storytellers, artists, content creators, and researchers across the 4 movements that we work in. The belief and thought behind that is that we needed to create a space of people who were intentional about building relationship with one another. So we ask a lot of our collective members. We ask them to show up every other month for solidarity gyms, right, where we practice, quote unquote, practice the art of solidarity. We work out those muscles to strengthen the muscles of solidarity, because we believe, and what guides our work is that solidarity is a praxis, right? It's something that we have to constantly practice and do. Kinfolk, Idris is a part of our collective. Kahlil's a part of our collective, right? Tracy's on our board. And so, yeah, that's our membership model, and our solution, our strategy for how we go about building collective solidarity.
Yes. Now, Tracy, to you, same question. Talk a little bit about your work and how it's seeking to build power.
It's been a journey. Working in media is not necessarily the safest space for an outspoken woman of color with thick thighs and silver hair. It's been an experience for me to step into my power and to be humble at the same time in serving community. In my experience, solidarity is a practice, it's a praxis. It requires deep care, intentionality, and planning. It's also not easy, while at the same time amazing. When I open myself up to learning from community and learning from peers and colleagues, that's when I feel that inspiration. That's when I feel the future that is possible. What I'm starting to learn is the art of repair, and knowing that this work is not easy, but we have to talk about that. And that truth-telling is essential for potential reconciliation. I do feel that we're in a time period, especially with cancel culture and overt oppression, that people need to practice those skills of repair work. And that means nothing is going to be perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all human. And we're an evolving being, always. But I have hope. I have hope in this generation here on the panel. I was just telling my housemates today, I feel honored that you invited me up here as an auntie, because I'm constantly learning from you all. I feel that your bravery, your courageousness is what we need in this moment in time. We see that with Zohar Mamdani, for example, or the new Seattle mayor. We need fresh takes. We need people who are down to roll up their sleeves and do the work and be guided by community. The stories that I choose to be part of are community-driven stories. I'm here with a beautiful film called Kikuyu Land, and it's 100% guided by not only community, but ancestors. And these are the stories I'm most interested in now, is impact as aesthetic. It's woven into all the storytelling that we do. Thank you.
So at Setting Sun, we're really trying to create a space where everyone can come and learn about Indigenous people of our place, be inspired, and change their worldview about us. And so we do that through different medias. We have a podcast. We have, some of our youth from our Young Tribal Leaders program are working on a graphic novel. We've done a collection of collecting stories of Coast Salish elders through a printed book with the UW Press called Jacinto. We have, a podcast, the Young and Indigenous podcast. We have our films that mainly address our local and regional Indigenous social environmental issues. And so, one of the projects, The River Remembers, it tells a story of the Elwha River and the lower Klamath dam removals. And these were the two biggest tribal-led dam removals in the country. It's starting a wave of, this movement to free rivers everywhere. Healthy rivers means healthy planet, healthy people. And we had a project called The Sound, which was a dramatic narrative where it was completely community driven. We had a youth writers room that, storyboarded the script. They brought me in as a screenwriter to get it to page. And all through the production process, we had 40 to 60 Indigenous local Salish youth on the set every day. And so for us, it's, the product is just as important as the process, involving community, getting the right permissions in our community, really being intentional with which stories we're sharing and how we're sharing them, involving the community in the story production, the post-production. And we're also building a place called the Setting Sun Circle, which will be a home for all of our films and our media, and we work with the state of Washington and our local school districts for implementing the Since Time Immemorial project, which is a local place-based curricula that's mandated in our schools. And it's messy, it needs help, and so we're creating this digital library of our content. A lot of stuff doesn't make our films, right? But we have rich content, and so we're creating a digital heritage library where you can look up these interviews by category, theme, and we're using that with Washington State Legislator and the schools, and so bringing these policymakers and leaders together and impacting them through meaningful storytelling is kind of our MO. What was the second part of that?
Yeah,
I think it's covered.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you
Okay.
covered it.
Yeah. Next.
But Kahlil, before we come to you, either Noelani or Savannah, do you want to expand on what time immemorial means? Because I only really understood what that concept was the past couple months, and being in relationship with Savannah. So folks might not know what it means. So do either of you want to expand on what time immemorial means?
Do anything I missed? Oh, since time immemorial means like since back as far as you can remember, as far as time can go. So there's theories about how long Indigenous people have been here, very outdated theories. There's theories and evidence of native civilizations here from 130,000 years ago. There's evidence to 40,000 years ago, and yet a lot of people still believe in this land bridge theory from 12,000 years ago. And so we've been here as stewards of the land, and this since time immemorial is that idea. And for the curriculum specifically, Washington implemented like you have to do a place-based, not a generic pan-Indian education lesson. You have to do place-based, local, regional, tribal history. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, Kahlil, you next.
So as I mentioned before, I go by the Gen Z historian, and I try to capture a lot within that title. So I was born in 2000. I'm a definitely a Gen Zer, and I make my videos for Gen Z, for teenagers. I actually studied history at Yale University and specifically specialized in the history of social change and social movements. But I found that in a lot of the rich discussions between my peers, between academics, some who were very respected, some that I look up to and have looked up to for many, many years, the conversations can be very abstract. They can use language, even terms that we might be familiar with, like institutional racism, sovereignty, liberation, dispossession, something like colonization. The reality is that most kids in America, especially like 12 to 16, they don't know what these words mean. We're not talking at their level of understanding. And with that gap in our reach is also people on the other side, quote unquote, filling that in. Which is why we see the rise of conservative media taking over our youth, and not just young white men. Young people of all races, all genders, and all ethnicities are being flooded in the or being put onto the alt-right pipeline, which is this basically like this experience and this phenomenon of being on social media and passively being fed so much conservative content about modern politics, about history, that they just automatically lean more right over time. So with my work, I try to combat that by really simplifying these larger concepts into bite-sized stories and also incorporating pop culture. One example I like to give is if I told the average like 13-year-old about the dispossession of the Hawaiian people's sovereignty over the Hawaiian Islands, they might be interested, but they'll probably look at me like, what are you talking about? However, when Bad Bunny released his album like last year, he had a song called Lo que le pasó a Hawaii. And that song, like he's singing and I was able to stitch it. And I was like, Bad Bunny's, the title of the song translates to What Happened to Hawaii? And I'm like, well, what happened to Hawaii? And then from there, I can tell the story of the missionaries, of colonization, of the modern movements by the Kanaka Maoli to try to get more sovereignty over their lands and over their the ecology and everything related to that. But it all starts with me tying in something that they understand and using a story that they can internalize so that they can understand these issues. And that's something that I try to do with all of my work, once again, mainly on TikTok and Instagram. Started recently with a newsletter on Substack to reach a little bit of a higher audience that's college aged. And what I ask of people all the time is, I'm very lucky and very fortunate to be a very successful creator, financially speaking. So all I really just need are stories. And anytime that someone has a story about a community, about a people, about a place, that I could then translate to young people to help them understand, help them internalize progressive ideals, that's what I want. And this year specifically, I try to do more tourism, more travel to tell these stories with the communities and with the people who have not been heard. I heard some stories and recommendations from Cassandra here in Utah. I heard some stories about Kenya. I'm gonna go to Nairobi, ideally. I just came back from El Salvador, which was my first time in Central America 2 weeks ago, and I got to meet with some guerrilla fighters who were part of the FMLN, and when the US was funding death squads in order to protect their coffee plantations, these guerrilla fighters were teenagers using rifles to shoot down these airplanes, and in one city they had the tail of the airplane that they shot down, and it's a monument, a national monument for El Salvador because they fought against American intervention. And I was able to go down there and just hike with them and show them, and then tie that to conversations about Venezuela, about Greenland, and once again, make that so simple that anyone of any age can understand. And I think that's what we need more of.
Yes, yes. And Idris, before we come to you, Kahlil, you just made me think of something that I want you to touch on a little bit more. Folks might have seen, I can't remember his name, but there's this white guy who was in Minnesota doing like fake investigative reporting about the child care centers and like fraud in Minnesota. And that really did kind of shape the political narrative media environment that we are witnessing right now. Like that did play a role. Elon Musk retweeted it. It got viewed by millions of people. And so creators are playing a role in shaping political and media discourse. And so Kahlil, can you talk a little bit about the content you made in December where you that Fox News commented on, or Fox News made an article about it. So tell folks a little bit about that process so that they can understand why creators are so important in this moment as it relates to shaping media and political discourse.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I've been a content creator for 5 years, and I've won many awards, and I've been featured on many different news platforms, but I think my crowning achievement is being on Fox News last year. It wasn't just an article. They did an article, but they also did a panel with 5 people commenting on a video that I made. So yeah, give me a round of applause for that, right? Yeah, so that video, I moved to Boston about 1.5 years ago, and as I like to say, I like to talk about history. One thing that's really important this year is the idea of America 250, so the 250th anniversary of 1776, and with that's gonna come a lot of nationalist indoctrination, trying to highlight the quote-unquote good of America while downplaying. I think Trump really loves this idea of like downplaying or completely erasing how racist it was at the foundation. And one thing that I learned in Boston is that Jingle Bells was written right outside of Boston in Medford, Massachusetts. And it was originally written by a guy who went on to become a Confederate soldier, and it was a minstrel song. So it was a song first performed in blackface at a minstrel theater in Boston to making fun of black people who were enjoying the snow. And this is something supported by PhD research. They found the original playbill dedicated to the minstrel theater. So I made a video about how Jingle Bells was a minstrel song, and Fox News did their whole panel. And after, I think it was 15 minutes, you can watch it on YouTube, they say it's stupid, that liberals want you to hate America, that progressives are annoying, that I shouldn't be making this content. But one thing that they didn't do is dispute a single historical fact that I made. And it's because they couldn't. Everything was true. So that's one of the examples of one of my more viral videos that influence, and now people come up to me and they say, I can't really listen to Jingle Bells anymore, and I can't hear, which is not my goal. Listen to Jingle Bells if you want, but the goal is twofold. One is that that they understand minstrel theater is not something that's common knowledge to every American. Blackface, they might have heard of it in a controversy every once in a while, but they didn't necessarily understand how integral it was to American music, American culture, so they understand that new concept. And then secondarily, once again, they're slowly internalizing this idea that, yes, American culture was racist, racism was embedded into even something as simple as a song, a holiday song, and that helps them understand things like why we need reparations, the everlasting nature of racism, so on and so forth.
Yes. Yeah, Savannah started to talk a little bit about BLIS's membership model. And I don't know if we said what BLIS stands for. BLIS stands for Black Liberation, Indigenous Sovereignty. We have 47 members. A key aspect of solidarity to us, we have to resource solidarity. So our members have access to $1 million fund called the Radical Collaboration Fund to do collaborative projects, solidarity projects. And capitalism, it stands directly in the way of solidarity, because to engage in capitalism means you have to compete. So the next question for our panelists is, finish this sentence. Capitalism and the current power structure make my work hard by. And then after, a culture of solidarity will become possible when?
Yeah, by existing, just in general. It's tough to navigate. Wait, what was the question again?
Finish the sentence. Capitalism and the current power structure make my work hard by?
Existing.
And then a culture of solidarity will become possible when? And I think, Idris, for you, talk a little bit about your work and how you create a culture of solidarity through tech.
Well, I mean, these phones are not our friends, and they're meant to make us more addicted to isolation, to streams of information and distribution of information that is co-opted by the powers that exist. I mean, one silver lining about the moment is it's really outlined how technology is political, and it is our collective memory is something that is it is flexible, can be mediated, and that is the power structures that exist. Our collective memory exists on these platforms. What we know about each other, what we know about others, what we know about current moments in time is really dictated a lot of the times by the time we spend on this device. And especially as younger Gen Z, over 50% of Gen Z gets their news every day from social media. And so we need to repair and reimagine our relationship with our phones. And that's what Kinfolk is trying to do. We started in 2018 trying to reimagine the Christopher Columbus Monument in New York City. Mayor de Blasio was reconsidering what to do with that monument. And so for us, we wanted to reimagine it by creating our own monument. And 2016 was around the time Pokemon Go existed. It was sort of the big first example of location-based technology. It was also a moment of reckoning with our symbols. Out of the over 200 monuments that have been removed in the history of America, only 5 were removed before 2015. And so we are currently in a moment of repairing our spaces and our public spaces. And so we created this platform where we could work with communities and local spaces across the country to reclaim our history, tell their stories, and turn those into immersive experiences that are accessible as you walk around your public spaces. And it's grown, as we've worked across the country, it's grown into an archive that we're trying to, especially when we come around this 250th, find other pathways for folks to access information that can really help us live in solidarity with others. So we tell stories across the spectrum. We tell stories about indigenous history in LA and the Gabrielino Tongva tribe. We tell stories about African burial grounds in New York. And we work directly to co-tell those stories with community members. And so as we grow, we are looking to become a platform for collective memory to where creators can find spaces that are outside of these existing technological systems that are surveilled, that are where a lot of censorship exists, because again, we need those imagination infrastructures and distribution systems that we can own, that we can feel free to say what we want to say. And so technology, it feels weird, I'm a technologist that is not trying to use my phone, but it can be something that can really repair and draw us closer to each other in our land. And so when we do an exhibition, you'll see like 20 people, 30 people collectively looking at a monument experience and looking at that history together, talking about it, having conversations. In spaces where there's nothing acknowledging our history, which only 8% of the sites of National Historical Places in America are about Black and brown folks. This is a space where we can make that a reality. One more fact, out of the 48,186 monuments that exist, 0.5%, under 200 are also about Black and brown folks. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do. I'm not necessarily advocating for us to go and beg the government to make 48,178 monuments, but we need more spaces where we can own our collective memory, because that is a true tire to solidarity, to understanding each other. Across identities and demographics, we have similar struggles, similar triumphs, and so recognizing that amongst each other will bring us closer together, and also allow us to talk about the anti-blank that exists across these identities as well. And so we see technology as something that can bring us together. A little bleak right now, but I think if we can do this together, I think there's a possible future. I see a possible future where it can really bring us together.
Yes. And Idris, just tell people, people can pull up their phone after they download the app, right?
We'll be here all day, and we have our iPads. We can show you some of our experiences. Our creative producer, Asia's right here. She's going to be showing us some of our stuff. And we'll also be in New York, activating on the 250th from June all the way through December. So if you're in New York throughout that time, follow us on Instagram at Kinfolk Tech and stay in touch with some of our events. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yeah, Savannah, coming to you. Finish this sentence. Capitalism and the current power structure make my work hard by, and a culture of solidarity will become possible when?
Yeah, by forcing us all to compete with each other, but also in that in those divide and conquer tactics, in that means of pitting us against each other. Also, this fear that there isn't enough, right? That there isn't enough to go around, and actually we are just being distracted by fighting each other for the little bit of tiny little crumbs that are over here, instead of uniting around who really does own all of the lands and all of the wealth and the means of production and the media studios, right? And I think that, to Noelani's hot take earlier, I think our diversity is absolutely a strength, and it should be celebrated, and it should be amplified. And I think that we sometimes get so in the weeds with what makes us different and unique as an individual, because of all of the intersectionalities of our identities and all of the things that make us who we are, that we forget what we all have in common. As humanity, as living beings that are natural extensions of this land and this earth, and it requires a restoration of how we relate to each other. And I think that it requires a restoration of our models of kinship, and not only how we relate to each other as humans, but also how we relate to the land and the non-human world, the animals, our plant relatives, the water, right? And so to answer the second part of that question, what does it look like? It does look like a return, a restoration, a reparative process of what it means to be in relationship in that way. And I think that something I've been thinking about is, what does it look like for Native communities here in North America to really embrace and step into some of our traditional kinship models, right? What would it look like for tribal nations to adopt formerly enslaved people, right, into those nations, right, as citizens of those nations? We've come to a place where we're so scared that anything that this person or this community gets over here is taking away from what I can get and what my community has, and that's just not the case. It's not true, and so we have to overcome that.
Yes, and just before we go to you, Tracy, Savannah, talk a little bit about our research and what we found from our Fabric of Repair report, because I think that is important to name as it relates to like why we tell solidarity stories and why we braid narratives of reparations and land back.
Yeah, definitely. So we did a narrative experiment. We partnered with content creator Garrison Hayes. We co-developed with him 3 different videos. One that talked about the history of slavery and provided reparations as a solution. One that talked about the history of colonization and provided land back as a solution. And then one that talked about both histories and provided both reparative solutions. And we tested that across 3,000 5,000 Black and Indigenous people, and we wanted to measure how effective the different videos were at increasing support for those issues. And what we found was that the video that talked about both, we call this the braided narrative video, right? Talks about both histories, both reparative solutions, was the most effective at increasing support for both reparations and land back. And we also saw increase in cross-movement support, right? We also found what we call a spillover effect in those videos that just talked about the one community and the one reparative issue. So for instance, a Black person who was watching the video about the history of slavery and reparations as a solution, their support for land back increased after watching that video, which shows us that when we interact with a reparative solution for our community, it can increase reparative solutions for other communities as well. The one other thing that I'll talk about in that data is that we asked folks their support for those issues and also the belief that those issues are possible, right, that they're feasible. And what we found across both Black and Indigenous participants were relatively, very similar answers. We found that both Black and Indigenous people supported land back and reparations around 80%. But then when we asked if they believed it was possible, it was around 20%. Right, and so we call that gap between support for an issue and belief that it's feasible the hope gap. And we believe that closing the hope gap is the defining narrative challenge of our time, and that's what our work is really seeking to do.
Okay, so Tracy, same question for you. Finish this sentence. Capitalism and the current power structure make my work hard by, and a culture of solidarity will become possible when. And if you want to weave in, why you're here this weekend and the story that has brought you here this weekend, you should feel free to do that too.
Okay. I'm going to have to ask for a prompt again, but it makes my work harder by hoarding resources and disconnecting us from our purpose on Earth.
And then a culture of solidarity will become possible when?
We wake up.
Wake up to what?
For me personally, I am learning the ways that my mind is colonized. And as a person of color, as you mentioned, that does not exempt me from making mistakes. And I actually feel more accountable to do the work, to unpack the ways that I've succumbed to propaganda, I've been complicit in harm, and where I've potentially, ignored a reality because I was in survival mode. So what I'm attempting to do, with the guidance of many, it's a collective effort to unpack these systems and smash them, if possible, and work together in collaboration across sectors, across intersectional identities, to build anew. I believe a future that is built on intentional love and care and hope is possible. I believe in our futurisms, Black, Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, queer visions of what we can be. Oftentimes I think in this moment, what if this is our heaven on earth? What are we doing? How can we have full gratitude for this moment in time and build together towards a future we know that's possible? And I believe storytelling is key to that.
Yes.
It connects our emotions, our hearts, our minds, and our spirits to one another.
Yes, it does. So we got a couple more minutes left. I do want to bring some voices into the room. So are there any questions in the audience for our panelists? So the question was, what do you find as the biggest obstacles outside of capitalism on a personal level as you all do this work? So let's go down the line. Tracy, were you about to jump in?
Yeah. Clearly fear.
I would say for me, like in education work, it's oftentimes ignorance and I think long-standing beliefs that are unchallenged and people not having an open mind to have those beliefs challenged. There's a lot of I luckily have a very, very diverse audience. Most of my audience are Black people, at least from what I can tell from the comments. But sometimes there are pseudo histories within the Black community. So made up stories. I think one of them that you often hear the most is we are the original indigenous people. They would call some of the native people up here on stage with me fake and frauds and all of that. So, and that's a very long-standing belief that's not necessarily mainstream, it's fringe, but you see it a lot online. And between that and other beliefs around the path towards Black excellence is solely through capitalism, is solely through making a lot of money. The idea that because other communities, let's say, for example, exist around the world, that it's not our problem, that we can turn away. There's a lot of ignorance and selfishness, and honestly, a lot of it's driven by fear. And that's something that I come across a lot as pushback to my commentary or pushback to my knowledge, is when people attack it without doing their own research and without being open-minded.
Yeah, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think as an Indigenous storyteller, storytelling takes a lot of vulnerability. And I think that part of it is really taking care of yourself as a filmmaker and whatever heavy topics or things you're covering is really, taking care of your own health and also ignorance. There's so many people that just tribal history has been erased so bad in a systemic way that we're combating and having to reteach people or teach people all the time, and that kind of takes away from the work that needs to be done. So yeah, I'd say that.
It's hope, but then it's also anti-Blackness. I don't think we as a society really truly understand how anti-Black American culture is. I think we have some understanding of it, but I don't think folks really understand how core it is to the quote unquote American experiment. And in talking about reparations and being an advocate and a strategist for reparations, and having to go out into the world and talk to my own community and to folks who are not Black, and have to be so vulnerable and recount time and time again as to how when Black folks started to self-organize and create their own economies, we could look at Tulsa, we could look at New York, we could look at New Jersey, you could look all across the country. Every single time Black folks started to have self-determination in their own economy, it was demolished. And so to me, I say that the work of reparations it's not just a financial project, it's a political and cultural project. And the work for me of reparations isn't over until we create a culture that loves Black people. And what does that look like to create a culture that loves Black people?
Yeah, I'll talk personally. I think for me, it's truly reconnecting with the land. As someone who lives in New York City, I really revere and get a lot of inspiration from the land. However, truly tending and getting my hands dirty in the land is really hard, but that is super important for me moving forward. I think one of my biggest inspirations is these song lines from the indigenous community in Australia. They're basically like dream pathways, where there were songs in which the indigenous communities really through song used it as a GPS of sorts. And you would sing the song, which would identify different areas, different foods that you could eat, landmarks so you could make your way through. And there was a university that was researching sort of the land in Australia, and they followed one of the guides on this song line, and they reached an end, and the guide was like, "This is not the end of the song. We're only halfway through, but we're at the water." And so they did some high-tech scanning of the ocean and found that before the Ice Age, there was like this land that was really covered by the Ice Age. And so these are stories and song lines that are hundreds of thousands of years old from before the Ice Age that are still helping folks navigate today and are pretty accurate. And so that relationship with the land is something that as Black folks, I think we need to start thinking and sort of get ingrained. There's a lot of history with Black folks in land that I personally have felt disconnected from how my ancestors have navigated. And so for me, being a technologist, that's something that's super important. Technology is also just raw minerals, rare minerals, and land. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about.
I love that.
You got the last word, Savannah.
Okay. Well, the question was interpersonally, right? And I would say the biggest barrier that I see in the work that we do in bringing people, different communities together, is moving through the unhealed parts of us, and how that can be a barrier that could stop us, right, from being able to engage. It can lead to defensiveness and wanting to be unable to hear someone or unable to let another group be centered. I think, as a Native woman growing up and just not seeing Native people in racial justice space, larger racial justice spaces left out of the conversation, I instinctively always go to the place of, well, what about us? What about my community? And I think a lot of communities feel that way and feel erased and feel left out. And I think that can sometimes stop us. That could be, the stopping point where we become disengaged and we become unwilling to push through that really hard feeling. And so I think, it's definitely, those hurts that come up and make us withdraw in. And it's not easy, right? Like, we bring people together who want to do that, and then when we get in the room, stuff comes up, and it's really, really hard. But it's worth the effort and the investment.
Yes. Please give it up for our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thanks, y'all.